Good evening, Miss Jasmine in third period class. This is Edgar Allan Poe's The Telltale Heart. Enjoy.
We found the old man dead beneath the floor. You're responsible for his death. Now, you can tell us what happened and get away with the insanity plea, or you can keep silent and worsen your sentence.
True. I'm nervous, very nervous. Dreadfully nervous, I was. And am now. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease has sharpened my senses. Not dulled them. Not destroyed my senses. Above all, the sense of hearing was acute. I heard all things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How, then, am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I could tell you the whole story. It's impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. He had the eye of a vulture. Pale blue eye with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. So by the degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever.
Ah! The exposition. He gives us essential information about events which are to come. You killed the man for his evil eye.
Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded. With what caution. With what foresight. With what dissimulation I went to work. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And about every night, at about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it. Oh, so gently.
And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out, and I thrust in my head. When my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, oh so cautiously. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night at midnight. But I found it was impossible to do the work, for the eye was always closed. It was never the old man that vexed me, but his evil eye. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity.
The action rises. You're leading up to the murder.
I was in. The lantern was opened. I had the light focused upon the man's evil eye. The old man's eye once again was closed, and the deed was impossible to do. Slowly, I retreated. I backed away, still keeping the light upon the man's evil eye. I lowered the lantern. I lowered it farther, and as I leaned forward to look at the man, my hand slipped upon the tin fastening into his cane. The racket arose in the man in his sleep. He looked around. I kept quite still and said nothing. As he sprang up in bed, he cried out, "Who's there?" Presently I heard a slight groan. He had been trying to fancy the racket as causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney."
Exactly. The initial incident. This is the event that brings about the conflict. Foreshadowing. As to what, we don't yet know. Continue, sir.
I had waited a long time, very, very patiently. But even yet as I refrained, I kept still. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I set the lantern down and withdrew a pillow from his floor. I creeped toward him, stealthily, silently. Oh, how silently I proceeded. I could see the man, even in the blackness. The man knew not where I was. Then, with a loud yell, I threw myself down on top of the man. He shrieked once, and once only. For many minutes, the heartbeat beat on with a muffled sound. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. There was no pulsation, and his eye would trouble me no more. I took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited his remains beneath the scantlings. Then I replaced the boards so cleverly that no human eye could have detected anything. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. There entered 3 persons who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale, and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still, they sat, and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice, yet the sound increased. I arose and argued about trifles, in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting, and grated it upon the boards. But the noise arose over all, and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly, and smiled. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark! Louder, 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 louder! Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more! I admit the deed. Tear up the planks! Here, here! It is the beating of his hideous heart.
He spoke to us in an interior monologue, describing his thoughts as they occurred to him during his experience. It was all, of course, in the first person. The story was told from beginning to end, giving it a linear chronology. This conflict, man against self. The resolution to his guilt is his confession to the police officers. This part of the story is also the climax. Crazy bastard.
This production has been brought to you by Sherryl Santa Anna, Alex Sturm, Drew Davis, Tyler Oakley, and Meghan McCarron.